welcome back to the Winning Agenda's coverage of the Sorcery Discord League Season 2 for 2023. My name's Jesse Muirman-Marshall, and it's an exciting time in the league because we're going to the top 16. So I was fortunate enough, despite a less than stellar 4-4 record in Season 2 of the league in the Swiss rounds, to end up just scraping into the top 16. Season 2 was exciting, it was fun, got to play my 8 games or so. Unfortunately, didn't get to play as many games as I did in Season 1 just because of other life pressures at the moment. But I was trying out a new Deathspeaker deck. This is actually my opponent's deck, Deathspeaker Aggro, Metroidpikmin, I should say, who has put together a deck that I'll go through in a moment. And I was playing this Deathspeaker Control deck, which is one that I played for most of the Swiss rounds. So for those of you who are a little bit less familiar with Sorcery, I'll just give you a very quick rundown. So the league is run over about a month. You play 8 games in the preliminary rounds. As I said, you can play against any opponent in the league, and you can only play each opponent once. Once you've played your 8 games, your record for those 8 games determines your standings, and then you can play additional games, and you get like 1,000th of a point increments for each additional game you win beyond your first 8 against further unique opponents, and that effectively just acts as a tiebreaker. So there is an incentive for people to keep playing games to help other people get their games in once they've finished with their 8. The league is going to run again in Season 3, so if you are interested, I'll put the link in the video description if you want to join up to the league for the next season. It's free, it's run through Tabletop Simulator. Ira, who is the tournament organizer with Eric's Curiosa, is doing a fantastic job running the league, getting all the rules in order, getting FAQs in a timely fashion, and just generally trying to make it as fun an experience as possible. So shout out to Ira, thank you for running the league and for doing such a great job. And yeah, jump in the Discord, get involved. It's free, and there are booster prizes. So the top 4 get prizes posted out to them, and there are also some participation prizes. If you finish your 8 games, you go into the draw to win some of the participation boosters as well. So without further ado, let's jump into this matchup. So although we're both playing the Deathspeaker avatar, as you can see, the avatar section here of the deck, we've got very different takes on it, which I think makes for a really interesting match. And a really interesting matchup. So Metroidpikmin's deck is, as the name suggests, more of an aggressive deck. So it's trying to use the 3 summoning spheres to get into the opponent's territory and be able to summon minions into the opponent's area. So you may summon minions to affected sites. It costs 1, and you can play it in your opponent's half of the board, and that means that you can then play your minions onto their sites. What that opens up uniquely for the Deathspeaker is the ability to use Violimps and Sacred Scarabs. So Violimps have a Genesis ability of 2 damage to target adjacent unit, which includes avatars. So that means that if you have the ability to summon your Violimps onto your opponent's side of the board, you can always just be chipping in damage against their avatar every time you play one. And you can also very cheaply resummon them for 2 using your Deathspeaker's ability once they die. So you may cast 1 dead minion each turn, and for 0 if you're at Death's Door, whenever you summon a minion this way, banish it. So when the Violimp goes to the graveyard, you can then resummon it for 2 mana, do the 2 damage, and then the Violimp gets banished or removed from the game. You've also got this Highland Falconer, which costs 2, and if you play it using your summoning sphere on your opponent's area of the board, use your Genesis ability to search your hand for a hand or spellbook for a beast with airborne and mana cost 2 or less and summon it here. You can search up a Sacred Scarabs, which is a beast with airborne at cost 2 or less, and it has a Deathrite ability, so when it dies, it deals 3 damage to each unit here. So what this deck can do is use the summoning spheres to get Violimps in to do chip damage, play Highland Falconers to tutor up Sacred Scarabs, or just play Sacred Scarabs onto the opponent's avatar, and then kill their own Sacred Scarabs using things like Firebolts, which is actually a really excellent combo with Sacred Scarabs because it shoots 3 projectiles in the same direction and each deals 1 damage. So if you're directly on the opposite side of the board from your opponent's avatar, you can summon a Sacred Scarabs onto their avatar, cast a Firebolts, kill the Sacred Scarabs with the first bolt, which then deals 3 damage to the avatar using its Deathrite ability. So when it dies, it deals 3 damage to each unit there. And then the remaining 2 Firebolts still hit the avatar because it's on the same site. So in total, you end up doing 5 damage to the avatar that way, which is quite good. So the Sacred Scarabs, Violimp, Firebolts all get in there for a little bit of chip damage. You've then got Skirmishers of Mu, which received a buff going into the top 16. There was a new ruling that their ability, which says during basic movement, Skirmishers of Mu may perform a range strike from any location along their path. The ruling is that that's in addition to a move and attack action. So in Sorcery, you can move 1 square and attack. And the ruling is that if you choose to use the move and attack action, you can also use their triggered ability, because during basic movement, you may perform a range strike. So you get to do a range strike and a melee strike in the same turn. So these guys got significantly stronger. The rest of the deck is just a bit of ramp, a little bit of removal in the form of Poison Nova, the usual Grandmaster Wizard and Apprentice Wizard combo, and then a flood to get rid of Root Spiders on the opposing home square, and a Drums of Doom, which makes all nearby damage lethal to help getting rid of larger minions, because of course the deck has no trouble dealing small amounts of damage with Firebolts, Fire Limps, etc, etc. It just has a little bit of trouble dealing with beefier minions, so the one of Drums of Doom helps with that. There's then a few options in the sideboard, and the sites are pretty standard for a Deathspeaker deck. You've got Earth, Air, and Fire. A little bit light on the Earth Splash, only 4 Earth sites, but the only Earth cards are coming out of the sideboard in the Berry, Root Spider, and the one of Raytanus Titan. And you've also got the additional Gnome Hollows in the sideboard, and Aqueduct for 2 more Earth sites if you bring in the Earth package. So then we've got the Deathspeaker Control deck that I'm going to be playing. It is also Earth, Air, and Fire elements. Actually, I should say this deck obviously has water in it. So this is a 4-color deck, the Deathspeaker Aggro that Metroidpikmin is playing. Mine eschews the water, so no water here. But it's got a similar core, so Violib, Apprentice Wizard, Grandmaster Wizard, and Death Dealer are present in both decks. The difference is that this deck has the Nimbus Djinn as a finisher, so it's trying to build up cards in hand and then summon the Nimbus Djinn using a 1-of Summoning Sphere rather than a 3-of Summoning Sphere to finish them off. So you play the Summoning Sphere on the same turn, then you play the Djinn, and then you discard your hand and try and kill the Avatar in 1 turn. The other option for killing them is to use the large direct damage spells. So we've got a Major Explosion, which you can deal 7 to the Avatar at the center of the explosion, and then we've got a Craterize, which does 10 to the Avatar at the center of the explosion, and a few other direct damage spells that can deal chip in, 3 and other amounts here and there, as well as a Lightning Bolt. We've also got a couple of beefier minions that can help to get some damage in. So we've got the Titan that can strike effectively with haste on the unit on the square it's summoned on, which is just an alternative way to do a similar thing to what the Nimbus Djinn does in case the Nimbus Djinn gets blocked by them trying to stack things on the same side as their Avatar. You've then got the Raytanus Titan that can just come in and bonk everything there for 6, which will take out most of what they've tried to put onto their site. You've also got the Pact with the Devil, which the other deck wasn't playing, which can help you to draw a bunch of cards. It's just an additional card draw spell. Sacrifice spellcasters as a cost, so it can sack any of your wizards. And then we've got a Root Spider for the more defensive plays, which is going to be really important in this matchup because of what the opposing deck is trying to do onto the site that the Avatar is on. So getting a Root Spider down is really important. And then Dapperal Vampire, which just helps to gain a bit of life against aggro decks. But unfortunately is a terrible matchup against Sacred Scarabs because it's got 4 power, it's airborne, and Sacred Scarabs, if they attack you, if you play out a vampire and then they attack you with some Sacred Scarabs, the Scarabs deal 1, then they blow up for 3, so it kills the vampire. So Sacred Scarabs is one of the best counters to vampire, unfortunately. In the mana ramp slot, we've got Cause, the Stone, and the Black Obelisk and Angel's Egg. Angel's Egg also doubling up as some life gain against aggro decks, just to consistently regain a bit of life. And we've also got a Disenchant, which helps against things like the Summoning Sphere, but also opposing Cause and Mixes. So that's an overview of the 2 decks. We've got a few things in the sideboard. Tragedy, Worrywart, good against decks that are just focusing on magic damage, no good against Fire Limps. So they unfortunately won't get sideboarded in here. Holy Ground for a bit of extra life gain, an extra Root Spider, an extra Vampire, a Doomsday Prophet, and a King of the Realm. One other thing I'll mention on the sites is that I'm playing a Pillar of Xeros just for some extra life gain. Also, it might look a bit funny to have this in a Deathspeaker deck, but just the incredible power of being able to gain a whole lot of life, even if you lose a little bit of utility, can be really strong. So Pillar of Xeros still makes it in. And that's that. So heading over to the actual game itself, before we dive in, it's really interesting to note that in a Deathspeaker mirror match, the Deathspeaker's ability can actually be used on either player's cemetery. So you can actually summon your opponent's dead minions. So in a Deathspeaker mirror, it becomes very much a matter of managing what dies on your turn so that you don't give your opponent first access to something like a Grandmaster Wizard in your graveyard, because that can really ruin the game for you. So being aware of what you're putting into your graveyard as well as what they're putting into play and into their graveyard becomes really, really important, because you've got access to each other's cemetery, not graveyard, I should say. You've got access to each other's cemetery for your ability. So let's dive straight into the game. So we've got Metroidpikmin is on the play because they were the higher seed going into the game. And we've got a Minor Explosion Grandmaster Wizard Vampire opening. We've got a Tower, which is going to be helpful to accelerate us into one of our bigger plays. A Desert, which is going to help us kill potentially one of the small minions if they happen to play some small things. If they, for example, on turn 2 tried to play a Highland Falconer summon a Scarabs on the middle site, then we could kill it with the Desert, which could be handy. And we've got a Windmill, which is going to be our second air threshold to summon that Grandmaster Wizard. So it looks like a pretty good bunch of sites. And the spells are also decent. So we've got Removal, we've got Life Gain, and we've got the Card Advantage. So no ramp, but a decent opening hand. Because one of the things that you can fall into with this deck is just ending up with a lot of your ramp and nothing to do with it. So you basically can't mulligan away Grandmaster Wizards. So drawing a Death Dealer there, not exactly what we want to see on turn 1. We didn't want another big drop. We've sort of got our top end covered here. We wanted to see, Angel's Egg, Black Obelisk, Philosopher's Stone, Core, any of our ramp, or one of our smaller minions, like an Apprentice Wizard or a Violent. But alas, we drew a Death Dealer, that's okay. So our opponent goes Apprentice Wizard on the middle site, and that's kind of what we wanted to see with our Desert in hand, because we can now play the Desert and put the Apprentice Wizard in the bin. The unfortunate thing about it, though, is that we don't go to 3 mana, so they get first access to that Apprentice Wizard from the bin, using their Deathspeaker ability next turn. But I think the calculation that we make here is that if their next turn is spent simply Apprentice Wizarding, then that gets us basically a turn off to just look at building towards that Vampire, which we think will probably be helpful. So they do use the Apprentice Wizard because, it's good for them to be able to do that, but it's also, there's a bit of pressure on them to do it, so we don't get to do it next turn. And, as I said, it's not the most aggressive play, and in this matchup, anything we can do to kind of slow them down a bit is probably good, especially drawing that Angel's Egg there. So that was a good draw for us this turn. So we can get the Angel's Egg down and start gaining life against any chip damage they might have. So they also come down with a Vesuvius. So Vesuvius is an interesting card. If you've got 3 fire threshold, you can sack it to deal 3 damage to every unit nearby, which is quite powerful effect. Neither of our Vesuvius are, adjacent to the enemy avatar, which is good. But they are both adjacent to our own avatar, so we have to be a bit careful of those, because avatars are units as well, of course. So they do the Falconer tutor up the Scarabs play. So they've got another Apprentice Wizard, and then Falconer tutor Scarabs. And they had the Ruby Core come down as well to get them up to that 5 mana. So we're going to draw a site this turn. I think what I was probably looking at was, do I want to use this site to play out the Vampire more quickly, or do I want to use it to play the Grandmaster Wizard? And that's what I'm thinking here. So I use the Arid Desert to copy, the Mirror Realm to copy the Arid Desert, and then use the Apprentice Wizard to draw a card. Again, trying to get first use of that Genesis ability in the graveyard, so making sure it goes to the graveyard, to the cemetery on my turn, so that I can use it with my available mana. And then the Apprentice Wizard, of course, gives me a good 3 mana, good use of my 3 mana this turn. And with the Angel's Egg, I'm not too worried about the chip damage from that Sacred Scarab and the Falconer next turn. Also noting, of course, that ramping into the Vampire, as I mentioned in the review of the deck lists, not so good when they have a Scarabs on the board, because Scarabs is just a great counter to Vampire. And because Scarabs is airborne, it has that additional movement flexibility. so it can attack on the diagonal. So if I'd played the vampire on any of the middle sites that the Scarab can reach, so either the middle desert or the Vesuvius, the Scarabs could simply just attack the vampire and kill it. So much better to save the tower to play the Grandmaster Wizard. And the downside, of course, is that I wouldn't have been able to attack them back with the vampire anyway, even if I'd played the vampire on a new site. So Skirmishes of Mu comes down, which puts a little bit more pressure on me in terms of that ability to double attack. So I gain a life back at the end of their turn from the Angel's Egg. And then I've got this choice about what I want to do. So I'm starting to assemble the combo a little bit. We've got the Djinn, we've got the Grandmaster Wizard. We just need to find that Summoning Sphere and a few more cards, but the Grandmaster Wizard is going to help with that. So the Deathspeaker is going to play out a tower, presumably. Yeah, so down goes the tower. And that's our second air threshold, but also puts us up to 6 mana for the turn so that we can play out the Grandmaster Wizard. So down goes the Wizard. And that Sacred Scarabs is unfortunately going to be able to bomb us for 4 next turn, but there's not heaps we could realistically do about that turn and still be developing profitably. I think at this point, it would have been ideal to be able to play into Death Dealer this turn, but we haven't hit any ramp and the tower mana has gone away, so we're actually not going to be on 7 next turn, we're only going to be on 6. So a Violent comes in, kills the Wizard. I also think I forgot to gain a life at the end of that last turn. That was a bad error. So there goes the Scarabs. Attack with the Falconer. Attack with the Skirmishes of Mu. Gain a life at the end of their turn. Alright, so nothing's stacked up, unfortunately, for our Minor Explosion. We have drawn the Geistwood, probably a turn too late. Would have been good to have that with the Grandmaster Wizard, but c'est la vie. Play out the step. And then, yeah, it's a bit awkward to be on 6 mana here. We can't play Dapple Vampire and a Firebolts, for example, or a Lightning Bolt. We could play a Minor Explosion and a Lightning Bolt to kill two minions, but that's not even particularly strong. So we can, I guess the best thing we can do with our mana in terms of what's on the board is kill the Violymp and then use the Violymp to deal 2 damage to the Falconer, but again, that's not really very good either. And we don't have the 7 to be able to go Lightning Bolt, Minor Explosion, and Violymp either, which would have been nice, because then we could use the Minor Explosion on the Skirmishes, the Lightning Bolt on the Violymp, and then banish the Violymp to kill the Falconer. The other downside, of course, of killing the Falconer is that it puts it in the graveyard for them to use next turn. So we do need to be careful about doing that. So kill the Skirmishes, that's priority number 1. We can sack Vesuvius here to kill both the minions. It doesn't cost us any mana, but that puts us down. Oh, it doesn't cost us any mana this turn, but it puts us down a mana permanently, which is not really ideal. It also gives them an opening to play a site there. So you kind of need to be sacking Vesuvius on a turn that you're also planning to play a site to replace it in a matchup like this, because otherwise you're giving your opponent an opening. So an Oasis comes down, Grandmaster Wizard, draw 3. So looking at that, I'm glad I didn't play the Geistwood last turn, otherwise they could have gone Summoning Sphere, Grandmaster Wizard on my Geistwood, which would have been really bad. So attacking for 1, and then we gain 1 back. So that's not too bad a turn for us. The downside, though, is we're now under threat of this Summoning Sphere, which is pretty scary. So we've got Earthquake, and it is live. So we play the Geistwood here. And we have the option to play like a Death Dealer, but that kills the Grandmaster Wizard, which then gives them first access to the Grandmaster, so we don't really want to do that. So our options are play the Vampire, which in hindsight, probably the better option for us here. But we opted to play the Rotanus Titan instead, knowing that they've only really got 1 card in their deck that deals with the Titan. being the Drums of Doom, or Drums of Doom or Death Dealer. But if they played a Death Dealer on their turn, they're opening up the Grandmaster Wizard for us, so we're not too worried about that. But putting down this Ratanus Titan does give us a good threat, because it means we can be threatening 6 damage and actually try and get proactive. And I think if we are able to get proactive behind a minion like this, then we can get to our Nimbus Djinn combo relatively easily. But unfortunately, they do have the Drums of Doom, and then they've got the easy option for the Banish Violent and kill the Ratanus Titan. And that now presents a clear and present danger to us. So this is the big downside of the Ratanus Titan play, was that not only do we lose it if they have the one of Drums of Doom, but they can now threaten to summon the Ratanus Titan onto our avatar because we're on this summoning sphere. So we're in a little bit of trouble now, because we're under the summoning sphere. They've got a Highland Falconer in the bin, which is also threatening to summon another Sacred Scarabs onto us. And we've got this Ratanus Titan threat as well. So we play out a River of Flame to... I think this is probably the turn where I made an error in not respecting the amount of damage that they're able to put out. So if we count up the 6 from the Titan, they've also got 3 cores sitting there, which is just so much mana. So they've got the 6 from the Titan, the 3 from the existing Sacred Scarabs, and then potentially 3 more from another Sacred Scarab. So that's 6, 9, 12 damage that they can do to us next turn, for a grand total of 9 mana. And they've got exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've actually got 10 mana. So they can banish... We chose instead to play the River of Flame, Firebolt to the Grandmaster Wizard, and draw up the cards to try and get a bit of card advantage. Whereas I think playing out either the Earthquake to move the sites around and then move our avatar off onto that tower on the side, or playing out the Dapper Vampire to gain some life would have probably been a better play. I think I got a bit too spooked by the Drums of Doom and the Sacred Scarabs in terms of the downside of playing out the Vampire. The other option would have been to summon our own Ratanus Titan, but we didn't. The annoying thing was we didn't really have a particularly good place to do it, so we would have just been spending 7 mana to not do anything, because we couldn't do it onto our own site with our Deathspeaker. So instead we ended up... It really all started with the Drums of Doom. And the Drums of Doom was the killer, as well as the choice to play the Ratanus Titan rather than the Dapper Vampire the turn before. But I think, obviously, even if we'd played the Dapper Vampire, they would have had the Drums of Doom to deal with it. But what we could have done was play Dapper Vampire, and on the turn we played the Titan, play Dapper Vampire and remove the Highland Falconer or the Violent from their graveyard, from their cemetery, which would have removed a threat, as well as putting down a threat of our own that didn't have such a big downside if they happened to have the Drums of Doom. Because the downside of putting the Titan with its Genesis ability into our graveyard was just so massive, and we unfortunately got punished by that. So we have another Grandmaster Wizard here, which we can finally summon onto the Geistwood. So we're down on 3. We obviously need to be careful. We're not 100% dead, but we're in a bit of trouble. We've had a look at their graveyard. We know that their cemetery. We know that there's nothing there to deal direct damage. But of course, they could have any number of things that deal damage under the summoning sphere relatively easily. So we've got a choice here. We've played the Grandmaster 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we've only got 2 mana left. We've got the summoning sphere, so we've got the combo. So we know that we can put them to Death's Door next turn. The question is, what's the best way for us to avoid going to Death's Door this turn? Being on 3 life, we're going to go up to 4 from the Angel's Egg. So they're going to have either 2 Violimps or like a Violimp and a Lightning Bolt, but then we're demanding that they have another one the following turn to be able to kill us from Death's Door as well. So that is actually asking quite a lot. They do have 4 cards in hand, but they have to be... actual direct damage cards. We've already got 3 Scarabs and a Violimp, or 2, I think, at least 1 out of the way here. So we're kind of like, okay, they have to spend 2 spells most likely to get us down to Death's Door. So the Angel's Egg is going to gain us a a life. Our opponent's just saying, can we put it to the side, which you do. So they're gonna, Angel Egg's gonna go into life, put us to 4. So can they get us to Death's Door and be able to kill us next turn? That's gonna be the question that we're asking. So we've moved off to the right because rather than playing out of sight that turn, just because we want to get out of the way of firebolts, which is obviously something they're playing 4 of, and it's a projectile. So they have the lightning bolt, which puts us to 1, and then they've also got the Violent. So they do have 2 cards to deal the direct damage straight away, get us down to 0. So we're at Death's Door. Angel's Egg's not going to be gaining us any life. And although we now have the kill in hand, or we're able to get them to Death's Door this turn, it looks like we're probably going to be a turn late unless they have whiffs in hand here. So we have to hope that they've got things like Apprentice Wizards and Skirmishes of Mu and things that don't deal damage straight away if we're going to get them. And we do also have to be careful here of, obviously there's a Violent that's threatening lethal. So we'll draw up. So what can we do? We've got 8 mana. So we have to kill the Violent. We have to find something to kill the Violent, and our combo costs 7 mana. So it's going to be pretty hard for us to pull everything off this turn. So how are we going to play out Summoning Sphere, play out Nimbus Djinn, and deal with the Violent and banish it? That seems like a bit too much to ask of our mana, most likely. So we have the Vesuvius, which we can crack, but it's not adjacent to the Violent, unfortunately. Or it's not nearby the Violent, so it can't kill it. So we'll have a think here. So we choose to sacrifice our Vesuvius to kill our own Grandmaster Wizard as a start, to draw 3 new spells. So that's a... Well, we have to remember we've got the Philosopher's Stone as well. I'd actually forgotten about that. So we've spent 0 mana, and the Vesuvius provided us mana at the start of the turn. So we've got Philosopher's Stone, so we've actually got 8 mana still, plus the discount on the first spell we play each turn. Okay, so Vesuvius has turned to rubble. It's killed our own Grandmaster Wizard. The Philosopher's Stone means we can cast the Violent for 1, and it's going to be on the same side as our Deathspeaker. So this is actually, we're now safe from Lightning Bolt. Our opponent can still firebolts us from the Apprentice Wizard, so we're aware of that threat, but I think there's probably nothing we can do about that. We've got just enough mana, so our first air spell is going to be Summoning Sphere, that's free. Our second air spell will be Nimbus Djinn, that'll cost us 6. And then we've got 1 mana to play the Violent with the Philosopher's Stone discount. So we Violent their Violent. So will we have enough mana to banish their Violent? Oh, we can. So we can then play Violent for 2. So that's 1. Yes, we do. We have just enough. So we can go Violent, kill their Violent to kill their Apprentice Wizard, which saves us from firebolts. And then, well, it doesn't quite save us because they can still move their Deathspeaker, I suppose. Then we play the Summoning Sphere for free, then the Nimbus Djinn for 6. And then... Oh, we can do the Violent from the bin for free because we're at Death's Door, of course. We could have actually done Grandmaster Wizard for free instead because we're at Death's Door. But, of course, we had to get rid of the Violent because that was lethal. And they had the other Violent. So... an unfortunate end to game 1, really tight. The Drums of Doom was what sealed our doom on that Raytanis Titan. I think if we had chosen to banish the Titan rather than the killing the Grandmaster Wizard and drawing cards, we might have been able to draw the game out a bit. But they did still have the Summoning Sphere into double Sacred Scarabs that turn. And the Sacred Scarabs just kept our vampires off the board. That was the real killer as well. So a super fun game 1, very, very tight. Managed to get them to Death's Door, but just a turn too late. Cleared out a few of the threats. You know, we cleared out the Violent, we managed to clear out the Apprentice Wizard, but they had the follow-up Violent, which was unfortunate. So we've sideboarded out 1 Raytanis Titan and sideboarded in a Root Spider. I think we sideboarded in a Holy Ground too. I didn't quite catch which site we took out. But our opening hand for game 2 looks pretty good. Probably chuck that Poison Nova back, I reckon. Because Poison Nova not particularly effective against all of their minions that are doing things on Genesis. So killing them not particularly relevant, especially spending 5 mana to kill them. which then makes it a little bit harder for us to actually banish them that turn. So starting off with a Geistwood, which possibly risky to have that on the home site. Probably better to have it on the middle, but the problem with having it on the middle is it's also easier for them to get their stuff there. It makes a Violent more dangerous. I think the best place for it is probably on site 2 or 4 there, or location 2 or 4, the ones adjacent to the left and right of our Deathspeaker. But with an Apprentice Wizard in our opening hand, I think we're just like, let's try and get max value out of this Geistwood. Because now we're setting up a situation where if we can draw another Fire Threshold producing site, we can go Desert next turn, kill our own wizard, draw a spell, then play the Apprentice Wizard number 2, then we can go Pact with the Devil the following turn. So they're electing... the only way they can stop us from doing that is by killing our Apprentice Wizard on our own Geistwood the following turn, which is like a pretty interesting play. Like the only way that would really be worthwhile is if we were specifically trying to work into Pact with the Devil. So we're hoping that they don't see that coming. So we go Arid Desert, kill our own wizard, draw another spell because of the Geistwood, making our Apprentice Wizard's Genesis ability also a Deathrite ability. Unfortunately, then we're going to banish that Apprentice Wizard rather than playing the other one. Okay. And we draw a Root Spider. So the Root Spider going down under the Geistwood is exactly what we want, because we can make use of the Geistwood for our 2 Apprentice Wizards, and then we can chuck down the Root Spider to stop them from being able to do much. They've also got a Gnome Hollows, which is an anti-Nimbus Djinn piece of technology. It's a site that 3 or greater power minions can't enter. So that means Nimbus Djinn can't enter it, and that's pretty much the sole reason, that and Root Spider, that we've got a Wind Blast in our deck. So we've got the 2 Wind Blasts to help pull their avatar, or blow their avatar, off the Gnome Hollows onto a site where we can summon our Nimbus Djinn. So a Ruins comes down here, which is another fire spell, which is great. Another Fire Threshold. So we now have the Threshold for Pact with the Devil, so we'll play out the Apprentice Wizard and hope that they don't just randomly go ahead and kill our wizard on our Geistwood to draw us a spell. So we've got Black Obelisk as well in hand, which we're probably not going to play out because we haven't got heaps of high mana value plays other than the Crater Eyes, but not really a great play for us in this matchup at this point, the Crater Eyes. If we had a Grandmaster Wizard, I would seriously consider it. So they do actually end up playing the Firebolts here, 2 to us, kill the wizard, and then we get to draw off the wizard, but we're kind of cursing because we really wanted that Pact with the Devil. They then play our wizard from the graveyard. So I guess they just happen to have Xaxes for 5 mana and wanting to make most efficient use of that. Firebolts into wizard was the best. So that's worked out really unfortunately for us, because now we don't have a spellcaster to sacrifice with the Pact with the Devil. But that's okay. We'll press on. So we'll play the Root Spider or the Angel's Egg. I think we just want to get the Angel's Egg down here and start regaining that life from the chip damage. So yep, play the Angel's Egg, and we've got Root Spider next turn if we want it. So we gain a life. See what they've got. And I think you can see already what an important engine Grandmaster Wizard is. Like if you don't have the Grandmaster Wizard, both of these decks are kind of chock full of cards that aren't incredibly powerful on their own, but if you have the card advantage and you have extra things going on, you can just absolutely overwhelm them. And yeah, Sacred Scarabs in hand is not exactly where you want them. Oh, I accidentally drew the Deathspeaker rather than untapping it. So we're going to life end of their turn. Draw a site. Not exactly where we want to see Holy Ground when we're at full life, but that's okay. So we'll play out the Holy Ground just for the mana. So we go up to 6 mana. And then we've kind of got a bit of a lame hand in a lot of ways. Like we could Pact with the Devil to dome ourselves for 10 and draw some cards, but kind of rather just wait for the next spellcaster to come. And the Black Obelisk here helps a lot with that, because it allows us to, if we do draw a Grandmaster Wizard, actually have enough mana to potentially, or be close to having enough mana to potentially Grandmaster and Pact with the Devil the same turn. And if we can pull off Grandmaster Pact with the Devil on the Geistwood, we draw 9 cards, which is pretty outrageous. And probably means, if we're not like dead at that point, it probably means that we're going to win the game. So since our opponents had a pretty slow start, building towards that kind of play is, I think, where we want to be at. So our opponent comes in again here with a Lighthouse and then a Bury. So they bury artifacts here, but unfortunately for them, both Angel's Egg and Black Obelisk still function when they're buried. So the Bury not achieving much for them there. And then come in with the Sacred Scarabs. So Sacred Scarabs gets us for 1, and then we gain the life back from the Angel's Egg. End of turn. So take 1, gain 1, and then we move on, unless they've got another play. So we took 1 from the Scarabs, gain 1, and then we take 2. Yeah, I just was shortcutting, ignoring the Sacred Scarabs damage, because it was going to be repaired at end of turn anyway. Alright, so now we've got the option to play the Root Spider under our home site. But I think it's kind of like, do we wait and see if they've got a Summoning Sphere anyway before we go ahead and invalidate our own Geistwood? Because the Geistwood is only bad for us once they get, Summoning Sphere, Highland Falconer, and start dumping Sacred Scarabs down there. Or Vilimps. It's less of a problem if they're not even close to that. And since they've only got 2 cards in hand, I think we're feeling pretty okay with not doing that. The problem, though, is we don't really have a lot of plays. So I think we're just going to disable their Sacred Scarabs where they are, and then we can move the Root Spider later if we need to, back onto the Geistwood. So I think that's the right way to go. It lets us take out the Sacred Scarabs this turn, effectively, and still have the option to move the Spider back onto the Geistwood later. So the Black Obelisk Angel's Egg combo is taking us up to 9 mana here. So they bury the Sacred Scarabs, and then the Sacred Scarabs bury their own Sacred Scarabs to kill our Root Spider, because Sacred Scarabs then blow up once they die underground, which is unfortunate. So we did lose that Root Spider, which in hindsight, perhaps playing the Minor Explosion to kill the Scarabs would have been better, and then playing the Root Spider the following turn, or even doing both. But yeah, anyway, it is what it is. So I lost the Root Spider. We go down to 17. Don't know why. I think that was just a misclick. We should have... I think I maybe forgot to gain a life at the end of my turn. Yeah, that's what happened. So, mistrigger, bad luck. We've ended up on 17. So, kind of now in this weird situation where I've got a whole lot of removal and endgame cards and not a lot of gas. And I'm just debating, do I want to... They've also only got 2 cards in hand and not a lot going on. They drew, a couple of berries, like removal spells that they also don't want in their hand early, and none of their engine. So the question here for me is, do I take this Pact with the Devil and just cop the 8 damage, or 9 damage, go down to 8, because it's rounded up? Or do I just pass the turn, or do I think about like drawing a site and then craterizing them? But that doesn't seem great. I mean, it kills the Gnome Hollows, is the upside of just craterizing them. But no, we elect to just sit this turn. So we draw a site and then nothing. And they've got an Apprentice Wizard. And the question is, are they going to kill their own Apprentice Wizard with something just so they can draw another spell? There's a high possibility that they will, given the way that the game's looking. We're both just super short on spells. Depends whether they think the thing they've got in hand is less useful in hand than as a cycle, effectively, with the Apprentice Wizard. So they do have a Violent, which is nice because it's a creature that sticks on the board, gets rid of the Apprentice Wizard, and lets them draw that spell back. So Violent worked out well for them there. Up to 19, down to 17 from the Black Obelisk, and then we've got to draw a spell. Alright, so we've got a Major Explosion, so more direct damage, and it kind of feels like here we're getting to the point where with both Major Explosion and Craterize and Minor Explosion in hand, we're looking at, we just want to kill them with, and heaps of mana, we just want to kill them with burn spells and just forget about the Djinn. So we can do something like move up our Deathspeaker, which is very risky against Violent deck, but we could move up our Deathspeaker and then Major Explosion, But then that puts us in range for if we play our Craterize. So instead we are thinking about tapping to play a site, but I think maybe tapping to draw a site might be the right play here instead, since we already have 9 mana. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure Craterize on the Gnome Hollows is probably the right play. But no, decided to play out the site, which is interesting. Like, are we building... I think we might just be like, oh, we really want to draw Grandmaster Wizard and do this Grandmaster Pact with the Devil combo. It doesn't seem great, though. I think at this point, after playing the site, I was kind of thinking, I do want to use my mana this turn, though. Do I want to play this Pact with the Devil now? It's kind of like... It's just sitting there rotting in my hand at this point. And I don't just want to sit there with all these cards in hand not doing anything. I could Wind Blast our opponent off the Gnome Hollows onto the Violymp and then deal 7 to both of them. And then I could resummon the Violymp. That seems like a good play, actually. Because that'll be a total of 7 damage. And it'll mean that their Deathspeaker's forward on the tower. Just really considering that Pact with the Devil. It's very flavorful that I'm sitting there going, do I want to make a Pact with the Devil? Do I want to make a Pact with the Devil? All right, looks like I'm thinking about that Wind Blast play. Wind Blast, Major Explosion. No, I just go ahead and Major Explosion. Yeah, I think I could definitely be a lot more aggressive here with my spells, probably just being a little bit too cautious. So it does 5 to them, kills the Violymp, and then I banish the Violymp for no effect. Since I can get rid of the Gnome Hollows with the Craterize anyway and deal 10 damage to them, I think getting the Deathspeaker forward, it would have been, an extra 4 damage that turn, put into 11. I think that's definitely would have been the right way to go. It would have been an effective use of Wind Blast, just a little bit too cautious to hold on to things there. So we draw a Pillar of Xeros, which actually in this situation makes me a lot more likely to want to Pact with the Devil, because I can gain a little bit of life back afterwards. So I've got 2 Root Spiders and our opponent's got 2 Sacred Scarabs in the bin. So that's 4 life that I can gain back. So if I go down to 8, then I actually go back up to 12. And that's a decent trade for drawing 3 cards at this point, I think. So I'm saying end of turn, what does my life end up at? I think I misclicked there somehow. I'm supposed to be on 17 each turn, and it's supposed to be a wash. But I somehow went down to 16. I think I meant to go up and click down. Anyway, who knows? Point being, I think I'm passing the turn here, rather than Craterizing away that Pillar of Xeros. Because if I now choose to Craterize away the Pillar of Xeros, I haven't got the life gain the life gain site to help defray the Pact of the Devil if I happen to whiff again next turn on my quest to find a spellcaster to sacrifice. So yeah, our opponent choosing to Firebolt that Apprentice Wizard on turn 5 or something just really has choked our whole game. So the Violymp comes down for no particular effect, and they just pass the turn. So a pretty slow play from them as well. Somehow I've ended up at 16. I think I just leave it be. I haven't taken any extra damage since having the +2 -2 thing in play and being at 17, but we'll have that be what it is. So Violymp deals 2 to the opposing Violymp. Just checking, saying, yeah, I'm just going to see how much I'm gaining. It's 5 now because we killed the Violymp. Yes, so sequence your things properly. Play the Pact of the Devil first. Yes, lose half your life. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll gain 5 now because the Violemp's dead. So we've drawn a bit of ramp and another Violymp. So we have the option here of killing our own Violymp with the second Violymp before playing out the Pillar of Xeros, but elected to just keep our Violymps in hand. So go back up to 13. And we've got 11 mana available, I think. So we can do a range of different things. So we play an Amethyst Core, we play out a Violymp. All right, so our opponent Lightning Bolts our Violymp, then uses our Violymp to kill our other Violymp by banishing it from our cemetery. Then they blink their avatar across, which now is like this kind of annoying situation where if we Craterize, we're Craterizing the tower if we want to do max damage to them rather than the Gnome Hollows. So definitely should have Craterized Wind Blasted many turns ago, and then we get punished by drawing the second Wind Blast anyway. So right now I think I'm just cursing Why didn't I go ahead and just get aggressive with the damage? I think if we'd gotten aggressive and wind blasted them onto the middle, we could have even killed them by now, given how many violence we've drawn. So this has worked out very, very poorly. So this time we're tapping, we're finally going to Craterize. Deal 10 and put them to 5. Discard that Ruins. Doesn't do any damage to us because we center it on them, which is good. We're far enough away. So Craterize, 10 damage. Now we've just got to figure out a way to do 5 more and then still be able to deal a death blow. And since they blinked away, it's a bit harder, but if we draw any spellcaster, we can chuck it down on our Ruins there, and it's 2 steps away, so we can just double Minor Explosion them. So we end up Wind Blasting them 1 closer, and then we Violent them for 2. Okay, so put them down to 3. So that was finally using the Wind Blast for something. So yes, using the Wind Blast to bring the Deathspeaker forward and then Violent them. And putting them to 3 definitely where we want them, because now if they don't move off that site, if they choose to play a site, and we've put them down 1 mana as well. So they're down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus the core is 8. If they want to go back up, and they do, they play a tower, that means that they're now in range of our Minor Explosions if we move across next turn. So I think we're feeling a bit more optimistic about being able to get ahead on the tempo here. So they finally have the Grandmaster Wizard, but it's come a little bit too late because they're now going to Death's Door next turn. And with the additional Wind Blast in hand, we've got the ability to kind of bring them back into range of the Minor Explosions, even if they run away a bit. So Skirmishes and Moo comes down, that's not going to be fast enough here. Saying, gain a life, lose a life from the Angel's Egg, Black Obelisk, we're just going to stay at the same life total. They say, yes, that's fine. And then we'll draw up Dapple Vampire, not doing anything here. Go ahead and move across. One thing we could potentially think about is taking out the Dapple Vampires for Tragedy Worrywarts, just so that we can't get, Fire Bolted and Lightning Bolted and things like that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Dapple Vampire is still good in some situations against this deck. It's just they've effectively got access to 6 Sacred Scarabs through the Highland Falconer Sacred Scarabs, and that's just so good against Vampire. But anyway, we forget about Vampire. Oh, we are actually playing it out as a threat because we've put them to Death's Door with the Minor Explosion, moved across Death's Door, and then we're saying, here's another threat as well. Play out the Vampire. And now they've got to try and run away from a potential another Minor Explosion, and they've got to run away from the Vampire or kill the Vampire and run away. But even if they take 1 step away from us, we can still bring them back with the Wind Blast or even chase them potentially with our Deathspeaker. So feeling pretty good. It's often a race to who gets them to Death's Door first. So Drums of Doom is going to do it in terms of killing the Vampire, but it's not going to save them from our Minor Explosion next turn. Take a bit of damage from the Skirmishes, and then they do choose to move across just to get away from a Lightning Bolt, which is, you can only play around so many finishes, right? When you're at Death's Door, you just got to play around as many as you can. So they then play the Falconer and go grab something. No, they grab nothing, I think, because they don't want to put a Scarabs on top of their Deathspeaker as a death bomb. They just want to make it as likely as possible that they don't die to Lightning Bolt. Minor Explosion, bang. So game 2 is 1 back for me, so it takes us to 1-1. Move into game 3.